The western frontier stretched endlessly, a place where life and death walked the same dusty trail. The wind carried whispers of lost souls, and the sun bore down with a fury that seemed almost personal. To outsiders, it was a land of promise, freedom, fortune, new beginnings. But to those who truly knew it, it was a place that stripped you bare, revealing what you were made of. This was the land that tested all into this harsh expanse, rode Eleanor Hayes, her figure silhouetted against the blood-red sunset. The stagecoach that had brought her west kicked up clouds of dust as it vanished down the trail, leaving her alone beside a weathered sign that read Hayes Ranch, established 1868. It was all that remained of her brother's dream, and now it was hers to claim. She clutched the deed in her hand, feeling both power and fear in that single piece of paper. She'd left behind a comfortable life in Boston, lace curtains, soft gloves, and the dull rhythm of polite society, for this, a world of grit and silence, where survival came at the cost of civility. Her first sight of the ranch broke her heart. Fences sagged. Barns leaned like dying men, and the corral gate hung by one hinge. The air smelled of dust and loss, yet even in ruin it had beauty, wild, proud, defiant. The land called to her, whispering promises of redemption and danger alike, but she wasn't alone for long. As she dismounted, the sound of hooves echoed from the ridge. Out of the shimmering heat rode a man, tall, broad-shouldered, with a hat pulled low to shield eyes that seemed to see too much. His horse moved with the steady grace of a creature long accustomed to danger. "Ma'am," he greeted, his voice low, rough like gravel under boot. "You're standing on land most folks don't set foot on without a reason." Eleanor straightened her back, her chin lifting with quiet defiance. "I have a reason," she said, holding out the deed. "This land belongs to me. Eleanor Hayes, my brother was Nathan Hayes." For a moment, something flickered in the stranger's eyes, recognition, then sorrow. "Nathan was a good man," he said finally. "Name's Cole Maddox. I used to work this land with him." Before, he didn't finish the sentence. But the silence told the rest. Before the outlaws came, before the shooting, before the blood Cole dismounted and looked around, scanning the horizon. "You shouldn't have come alone. This territory ain't kind to newcomers, especially not to women." "I'm not here to be coddled," Eleanor replied, her voice trembling slightly, though she willed it not to. "I'm here to rebuild what's mine." That earned her a half-smile rare, fleeting, but genuine. "Then you've got more grit than most men I know," Cole said, tipping his hat. "But you'll need help out here. Pride gets you killed." It was an uneasy beginning, a meeting charged with both tension and unspoken curiosity. Eleanor sensed the storm behind his calm exterior. Cole carried the look of a man who'd seen too much, someone who lived by his own code, somewhere between law and sin. Yet there was a steadiness in him that drew her in, even as she tried to keep her distance. That night, as the wind howled through the broken shutters, Eleanor sat by the dying fire inside her brother's cabin. Cole had promised to return at dawn with supplies. She listened to the coyotes in the distance, their cries merging with the wail of the wind, a lonely, mournful song of the West in that vast emptiness. She felt both fragile and powerful. The land was treacherous, yes, but it was also honest. It asked for everything and gave back little, yet somehow it made her feel more alive than she ever had before. Eleanor didn't know it yet, but she had already crossed a line, not just into outlaw country, but into a story where passion and peril would dance together under the same relentless sun. And at its heart stood two souls, both scarred, both searching, bound to collide in a land that tested every heart it touched. Morning came with a sky painted in gold and rose, but the land remained as unforgiving as ever. Eleanor stood outside the cabin, sleeves rolled up, her hands raw from clearing debris. The Hayes Ranch was hers in name only. In truth, it was little more than dust and memory still. Determination burned in her chest. She refused to let her brother's dream die in the dirt, true to his word. Cole Maddox returned at dawn. He brought tools, provisions, and a wordless sort of strength that steadied the air around him. He worked beside her without complaint, repairing fences, mending broken boards, hauling water. Every now and then their eyes met, a brief, charged flicker that lingered longer than it should. He rarely spoke of his past, but Eleanor could sense it. The burden of things left unsaid, sins unconfessed by midday. The wind carried whispers of trouble, not from the land, but from the people who ruled it. Cole warned her that the Crane gang, led by Jed Crane, had been seen near the river. Jed was the kind of man who took what he wanted, and lately what he wanted was control over every ranch in the valley. He's got a grudge against me, Cole said, tightening the reins on his horse. And he won't take kindly to you siding with me or owning land I used to ride, Eleanor frowned, wiping the sweat from her brow. Then let him come. I've dealt with men who think they can take whatever they please. Cole studied her, half admiring, half afraid for her. You don't know the kind of men we're talking about. Miss Hayes, this isn't a parlor argument. It's bullets and blood. I'm not running, she said firmly. This is my home now. Something in her tone silenced him in that moment. Cole saw more than a stubborn Easterner. He saw fire. The same fierce resolve that once burned in her brother. And with that realization came something dangerous, desire that night. They sat by the fire after hours of rebuilding the barn. The silence between them was thick, humming with unspoken things outside. Coyotes howled in the distance, but inside the small cabin, another kind of wildness stirred. Cole leaned back, watching the flames dance across her face. You're different from what I expected, he said quietly. Eleanor smiled faintly. And what did you expect? He hesitated. A woman like you, educated. Well-bred, shouldn't last a week out here, but you're proving me wrong. I've had to prove people wrong my entire life, she replied, her voice soft but edged, and I'll keep doing it. Their eyes met again, and the room seemed to narrow until there was nothing but the sound of breathing and the crackle of fire. The attraction was undeniable, dangerous, even, but neither dared to cross that invisible line out here. Love could be as treacherous as the land itself. The next day, the first sign of trouble arrived. A group of men on horseback appeared on the ridge, their silhouettes dark against the blinding sun. They didn't ride closer, but they watched. Cole recognized them instantly. Crane's men. They're sending a message, he muttered. Jaw tightening, Eleanor's heart pounded, but she stood beside him, refusing to show fear. Then we'll send one back. He looked at her, this woman from another world, standing tall in the dust and danger, and something in him cracked open. You're gonna get yourself killed being brave like that, he said, a wry smile tugging at his lips. Maybe, she answered softly, but I'd rather die fighting for something than live hiding from it. That night, Cole couldn't sleep. He sat outside beneath the stars, the air thick with the scent of sage and gun oil. He thought of her stubbornness, her courage, the way her hair caught the firelight like gold. He had sworn off love long ago, knowing it brought only pain, but Eleanor Hayes was not a passing fancy. She was a storm, sweeping through the dust and silence of his life, stirring feelings he thought long dead. And in the shadows beyond the ridge, Jed Crane watched too, a predator with unfinished business. The valley was stirring, the whispers of danger were growing louder, and soon both Eleanor and Cole would learn that love, in the wild frontier, was never free. It demanded a price paid in loyalty, fire, and blood. The night fell hard over the valley, smothering the plains in a restless hush. The moon hung high, a pale witness to the chaos that was about to unfold. The day had ended in fire. The Hayes Ranch, Once the last proof of Eleanor's brother's dream, now lay half in ruins. The flames had come without warning, torches thrown into haystacks, gunshots in the dark, horses screaming into the night. It was Jed Crane's message written in smoke. Leave or burn. Eleanor had fought the fire until her arms gave out, until the smoke filled her lungs and her vision blurred. It was Cole Maddox who found her in the haze, coughing, trembling, her hair streaked with soot. He lifted her from the collapsing barn just as a beam gave way behind them, showering sparks into the night sky. For a long moment afterward, the two stood on the hill overlooking the inferno, exhausted, broken, but alive. "Are you hurt?" he asked, voice rough, his hand on her shoulder. "Only my pride," she rasped, wiping ash from her face. "They won't scare me off. Cole, I won't run." He looked at her then, really looked, her cheeks streaked with dirt, her eyes burning with defiance. "You're too damn brave for your own good," he muttered. "Or too damn foolish," she shot back, but her voice trembled, not from fear, but from the intensity of everything, the fire, the loss, the nearness of him. They took shelter that night in the small stone house near the creek, the only structure untouched by the blaze. The silence between them was heavy, filled with the crackle of the dying fire outside and the echo of everything unsaid. Cole tended to her burns in silence, his calloused hands surprisingly gentle. When his fingers brushed hers, she flinched, not from pain, but from the sudden, undeniable pull between them. "You didn't have to come for me," she said quietly. "You could have left." Cole's eyes met hers, shadowed and fierce. "Could have," he said, "but I wouldn't have outside." The wind howled through the canyon, wild, mournful, and endless inside. Another storm was brewing. As the firelight flickered across their faces, the distance between them seemed to vanish. For weeks, they had fought side by side, their bond forged through hardship and silence. But tonight, something broke open, raw, real. Unstoppable. Cole reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "You remind me what it feels like to care again," he said. The words barely above a whisper. "I'd almost forgotten." Eleanor's breath caught. "And what if caring gets us both killed?" He gave a low, broken laugh. "Then we'll die knowing we didn't face this life alone." The space between them disappeared. His hand found her cheek, and she leaned into it, trembling. The kiss that followed wasn't gentle. It was desperate, born of fear, exhaustion, and unspoken longing. It tasted of smoke and sorrow, but beneath it all, there was warmth, a promise that neither wanted to name for a few stolen moments beneath that burning moon. They weren't a gunslinger and a grieving woman. They were just two souls clinging to each other in a world that had taken everything else when dawn came. It brought silence and guilt. The air smelled of ash and beginnings. Eleanor woke alone, wrapped in Cole's coat. The fire burned low beside her. He was gone. Only his hat remained, resting by the door. A note lay beneath it, scrawled in his rough handwriting. "Jed Crane won't stop until I end this. Stay here. Wait for me. Don't follow." Eleanor read it twice, her heart tightening with anger and fear. She had tasted what it meant to love him, and she knew now that she couldn't simply wait. The land might test all, but so did love. And if the West had taught her anything, it was that survival demanded courage, even if it meant defying the very man she loved. As the sun rose over the charred valley, Eleanor saddled her horse. The air shimmered with heat and dust. But she felt only one thing, resolve. She wasn't done fighting, not for the ranch, not for Cole, not for the life they both deserved. The fire had destroyed her home, but it had also burned away her fear. What remained was something fierce and unstoppable, a love as wild as the land itself. The sun rose red over the ridges, casting a bloody glow across the plains. It was the kind of dawn that felt like a warning, beautiful, but edged with danger. Eleanor Hayes tightened the cinch on her horse. Ignoring the sting in her blistered hands, Cole's note still burned in her pocket. His words echoing in her mind, "Stay here, wait for me, don't follow." But Eleanor had never been one to obey warnings, not when it came to her brother's dream. Not when it came to her heart. She mounted up and rode hard toward the canyon where she knew Cole would go. The air grew colder as the land rose into jagged cliffs. Every hoofbeat drummed a rhythm of defiance in her chest. She could almost hear Cole's voice scolding her, telling her that this land eats the unprepared alive, but love had replaced fear. If he was riding into danger, she'd rather share it than hide from it. Meanwhile, Cole Maddox rode alone ahead, his face grim beneath the brim of his hat. He knew what waited for him. Jed Crane, the outlaw he once called a brother. Years ago, they had ridden together under the same banner of lawlessness. When Cole turned away from that life, Jed had taken it as betrayal. Now, with Eleanor's ranch caught in the middle, it was more than revenge. It was unfinished business soaked in pride and blood. He reached the canyon by mid-morning. The place was a labyrinth of stone and silence. Broken only by the wind whistling through narrow passes, Cole dismounted, scanning the ground. Fresh hoof prints. Half a dozen men, Crane's gang was close. A rustle of movement drew his gun instinctively. But instead of an enemy, he saw a familiar figure emerge from the shadows, hair loose, eyes burning with determination. Eleanor. "Damn it, Eleanor," he muttered, holstering his revolver. "I told you to stay back, and let you die alone?" She shot back, sliding off her horse. Not a chance. Her voice shook, but her gaze didn't waver in that moment. Cole realized she wasn't the same woman who had first stepped off the stagecoach. The land had hardened her, sharpened her, made her one of its own. "You don't understand what's coming," he said. "These men aren't like the ones you've known. Jed Crane doesn't stop until he's taken everything. Then he'll have to get through me first." Eleanor said quietly. Cole's jaw tightened, a mix of frustration, fear, and pride. "You're going to get yourself killed being brave like that." "Maybe," she said, echoing her earlier words, "but I'd rather die beside you than live wondering if you survived." He looked at her for a long moment, and something inside him broke, not in weakness, but in surrender. The West had taken his hope, his peace, and nearly his soul, but this woman, stubborn, reckless, magnificent, had given him something back he never thought he'd feel again. Purpose. They moved together through the canyon. Silent and watchful, the sun climbed higher, beating down on the stone walls that rose like ancient fortresses when the ambush came. It was sudden and brutal. Gunfire exploding from both sides of the trail. Cole pulled Eleanor behind a boulder, returning fire with deadly precision, the air filled with smoke and grit. "You stay down," he shouted, but Eleanor wasn't the type to hide. Spotting movement on the ridge, she grabbed Cole's spare rifle, took aim, and fired. Her shot rang true. One of Crane's men fell from his perch. Cole turned to her, startled, and then grinned despite the chaos. "Remind me never to argue with you again," he yelled over the gunfire. The battle stretched into minutes that felt like hours when the smoke cleared. The canyon was eerily quiet, only the wind whispering through the rocks. Jed Crane had retreated. But not for long. Cole knew this wasn't over. He turned to Eleanor, her face streaked with dust and determination. "You saved my life," he said. Almost in disbelief. "Now we're even," she replied. Though her hands trembled as she reloaded, they rode out together, battered but alive, the echo of gunfire fading behind them for the first time. They weren't just fighting for land or revenge. They were fighting for each other as twilight fell and the stars began to shimmer above the plains. Cole glanced at Eleanor. "When this is done," he said softly, "I don't want to keep running. I want something real with you." Eleanor's gaze met his. "Then you'd better live long enough to make that promise mean something." The land around them was still dangerous, still treacherous, but for the first time, it felt like it belonged to them, two hearts bound by dust, blood, and a love fierce enough to challenge the very wildness of the West. The sky was bruised with shades of violet and rust as the sun sank behind the jagged mountains. The world felt heavy with the promise of rain, or blood, in the hush that came before the storm. Eleanor Hayes and Cole Maddox rode toward their reckoning. The battle in the canyon had bought them time, but not peace. Jed Crane was regrouping, and everyone in the valley knew that his vengeance would come swift and merciless. They reached the outskirts of the old mining town by dusk, a ghostly place where hollow buildings leaned like weary sentinels. Cole's horse snorted. Sensing the tension in the air, Eleanor dismounted, her boots crunching over the gravel. Every nerve in her body hummed with dread and defiance. She had fought fires, outlaws, and her own fear. But this felt different. This was the storm's eye. The moment before everything changed, Cole checked his revolver, the familiar rhythm steadying him. "He's here," he said quietly. "Crane likes to end things where they started. This was where we first rode together, before everything went wrong." Eleanor looked at him, her heart twisting. "You don't have to do this alone, Cole." "I started it," he said. "Jaw tight. I'll finish it." "You think that's what Nathan would have wanted?" she challenged, stepping closer. "You think my brother wanted more blood spilled over this cursed land?" Cole's eyes softened at the mention of Nathan, the man who had once believed in him when no one else would. "Your brother wanted justice," he said, "and I owe him that." Before Eleanor could respond, thunder cracked in the distance, not from the heavens, but from gunfire. The sound echoed through the empty streets, followed by a voice that made her blood run cold. "Come out, Maddox." Jed Crane's shout rolled like thunder. "You got one chance to face me proper, or I'll start with the woman." Eleanor froze. Crane's men had found her before, shadowing her every move. Now, one of them had slipped behind her and yanked her backward, a cold barrel pressed to her ribs. She struggled, but the outlaw's grip was iron. Cole turned sharply, his revolver raised, and stopped when he saw Crane step from the shadows, grinning beneath his wide-brimmed hat. "Let her go." "Jed," Cole growled. Crane's grin widened. "Ain't it funny, brother? You used to be just like me until that soft heart of yours got in the way. You chose her over everything we built. She's not the one who destroyed it." Cole shot back. "You did, the day you decided greed mattered more than honor." Lightning split the sky, illuminating the showdown like some divine judgment. For a heartbeat, the whole world seemed suspended. Two men, two paths, one inevitable end. Then the thunder rolled, and the guns roared. The shootout was chaos. Bullets tore through the air, thunder echoing their fury. Cole moved fast, protecting Eleanor, returning fire with deadly precision. She broke free of her captor. Ducking behind an overturned wagon, the storm above broke open, rain pounding the dirt, washing away the dust and blood in muddy streaks. Crane fired from the saloon doorway, his laughter echoing even as he bled. "You think you can outrun what you are, Cole?" he shouted. "You're a killer, same as me." Cole didn't answer. His revolver spoke for him. One clean shot that dropped Crane where he stood. Silence fell, broken only by the rain. Eleanor stumbled toward Cole, her skirts heavy with mud, her breath ragged. "Cole," she whispered, seeing the blood on his shoulder. He was still standing, but barely. "It's over," he said softly, his voice raw. "He's gone." Eleanor caught him as his knees buckled. They sank into the wet earth together, the storm raging around them. She pressed her hand against his wound, her tears mixing with the rain. "You're not dying, Cole," she said fiercely. "Not after everything, not after what we fought for." He smiled faintly, even as the strength faded from his voice. "You always were stubborn, Eleanor Hayes. Then be stubborn with me," she whispered. He laughed weakly, the sound breaking in his throat. "You've got yourself a deal." The storm began to ease. the rain softening into a whisper around them. The town lay in ruins, but the dawn that would follow promised something new. The worst had passed. And in the wreckage of violence, love had survived as the first pale light broke through the clouds. Eleanor looked down at the man in her arms, scarred, weary, but alive. Together, they had faced the storm, and neither the land nor its ghosts had managed to take their hearts. The valley would remember that night, the storm at sundown when bullets met rain. And love stood unbroken in the heart of the wild the storm had passed. The night that had once burned with fire and fury now lay. Still beneath a soft dawn mist drifted low over the valley, carrying the scent of rain-soaked earth and distant sage. The land, scarred and silent, seemed to exhale, as if even nature mourned what had been lost and quietly honored what had survived Eleanor. Hayes sat on the porch of the ruined ranch house, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders, watching the sun rise over the horizon. Its light spilled gold across the plains. Touching the wreckage with a fragile kind of beauty, the fences lay splintered, the barn charred black, and the once proud Hayes Ranch sign hung by a single nail. Yet beneath the ashes, grass still grew, small, defiant blades of green pushing through the dark soil. Inside the cabin, Cole Maddox stirred, wincing as he tried to sit up. His shoulder was bandaged, his face pale but alive. He had slept through the night after Eleanor had stitched him up by the fire, her hands trembling but steady. Now, as he leaned in the doorway, the light caught the lines of his face, hard edges softened by exhaustion. A man both broken and reborn. "You should be resting," Eleanor said without turning, "and miss the sunrise?" He murmured, moving slowly to sit beside her. "I've seen enough darkness for a lifetime." For a long moment, neither spoke. The only sound was the wind stirring through the valley. Then Eleanor broke the silence. "It feels strange," she said softly. "After everything, the fire, the fighting, it feels wrong that it's finally quiet." Cole nodded, his gaze on the horizon. "Quiet can be its own kind of healing. The land needs time to breathe." "So do we?" She glanced at him, her eyes weary but warm. "You really think we can start over? With everything gone?" He smiled faintly. "Everything worth keeping still here." He reached for her hand, rough fingers brushing against her calloused palm. "You, me, this land, it's enough to build on." Eleanor looked out at the wide stretch of plain that was once her brother's pride. "Nathan would have liked that," she whispered. "He always said the land doesn't belong to us. We belong to it. Maybe that's why it keeps testing us, to see if we're worthy of it." Cole's expression softened. He was right. The West doesn't hand out mercy. It makes you earn every inch of peace. As the morning brightened, a pair of riders appeared in the distance, neighbors from the valley, come to offer help. Word of what had happened had already spread, how Cole Maddox had faced Jed Crane, how Eleanor Hayes had stood her ground. People whispered that the storm had ended more than a feud. It had marked the beginning of something new together. Eleanor and Cole rebuilt, plank by plank. Fence post by fence post, days turned into weeks, and with every sunrise, the ranch came back to life. The land, once blackened and broken, began to bloom again. Wildflowers grew where ashes had fallen. Horses returned to the fields. The scent of rain gave way to the warmth of summer grass at night. When the stars burned bright and the coyotes sang in the distance, Eleanor would sit beside Cole by the fire, her head resting against his shoulder. They didn't speak much about the past anymore. Some wounds didn't need words. What mattered was the present, the peace they'd fought for, the love that had survived the fire. One evening, as the last light faded from the sky, Cole took her hand and said, "I used to think men like me weren't meant for peace. But maybe I was just waiting for the right person to fight for it with." Eleanor smiled, her eyes glistening. "And now that you found her?" He leaned in, brushing a kiss against her temple. "Now I ain't ever letting her go." The night settled over them, calm, forgiving, eternal. The wild, untamed West had taken so much from them. Yet it had also given something greater in return, a love as enduring as the land itself when the dawn rose again. Painting the valley in gold, Eleanor and Cole stood side by side, watching their world awaken. The Hayes Ranch was no longer just a remnant of loss, it was a symbol of survival, of rebirth, of love carved out of chaos. And so, in that quiet morning light, the legend of the Wild Hearts of the West was born, two souls who had faced the storm and emerged hand in hand, proving that even in the harshest land, love could endure beyond the ashes.